Imagine walking into any cricket stadium in the world and knowing the result before even the first ball was bowled. No team wanted to face them, no batsman wanted to stay at the crease.
For nearly 2 decades, the West Indies team ruled the world cricket with fire, flair, and fear. But how did a small group of Caribbean islands build the most dominant team in cricket history? And what caused it all to unravel?
This is a story of fast bowlers who hunted in packs, of captains who led with power and pride, and of a dynasty that was as cultural as it was sporting. And like all dynasties, it began with a trigger, peaked with glory, and faded with unanswered questions. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Reverse Sweep Show. As ever, I'm your host Suyash, and joining me, as ever, is my co-host AB. AB, the IPL is back again. How are you feeling about cricket and life in general?
IPL is back, but ironically washed out the first game.
Yeah,
But yeah, looking forward to the IPL and then also looking forward to the test season that is coming up. A lot of news coming around there, a bit heartbreaking, but yeah, that's the nature of the game. What about you, SS? How's it going for you?
yeah, the IPL seems a bit decaffeinated and also a bit watered down, literally. And as you just mentioned, I think my attention towards cricket is also gravitating towards what's going to happen in the World Test Championship in India's tour of England. So we thought that best is to recalibrate ourselves to Test cricket and maybe a good opportunity to talk about a team that's not going to be part of WTC final, but it's my second favorite team. And if you talk to a lot of people in the previous generation, it's the nemesis, but also a team that they lovingly think about, be nostalgic about. And so we are talking about the great West Indies team. And maybe for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, what is the exact topic about?
Yeah, I think the theme for this season is dynasties, and you gave the team that we are talking about. It's the West Indies, so it's fairly clear we are going to talk about the West Indies dynasty from back in the 80s, the legendary team that they had built up. For me personally, this is a very nostalgic kind of topic because I didn't see them play, but I heard so many stories about them play. When I was growing up and I started watching cricket, I used to watch cricket with my dad, and whenever there would be a Wasim Akram bowling an amazing swinging ball, my dad would then talk about stories from back in the day when Malcolm Marshall or Michael Holding would be bowling to these Indian batters. So yeah, that is what we talk about, the West Indian dynasty in Test cricket from 80s. And just to give people a context of the magnitude of the dynasty that they had built, this West Indies team had not lost a series from 1980 to 1995. And SS, I know you have done so much more research on this. So I'll pass it on to you to lay the ground for how strong and dominating this West Indies team was and also how feared they were.
Yeah, it's the swagger that everyone remembers. It's not just the skills and the amount of series and matches they won and how much they terrorized the opposition. It's the swagger. I remember watching the 96 World Cup and there were the national anthems being played around and my mom introducing that this is Lara, the captain of West Indies, and they are a formidable team and they reached the semi-finals and then they lost heartbreakingly to Australia. But yeah, it's being a colonial nation. They were introduced to cricket by England, and they became the fourth de facto country to play Test cricket. And they had initial years of struggle. I think we covered the New Zealand's initial struggle in one of our episodes in season one. We will link it down in description. But we also talked about West Indies that after coming of age after World War One, they had their first black captain and the recognition that it's a country that would need to tackle with all the situations around with different islands because remember West Indies plays as West Indies only in cricket and no other game, so you have fractured nature. In the 50s they started getting some success. I was reading about a match in the Oval when Sonny Ramadine and Al Valentine, I think the spinners did pretty well and they won a test match. So they kept on winning few test matches in the 50s and 60s but never consistently. And then they still had formidable pace attack, and people feared during the West Indies because they had so talented players, the three Ws, Walcott, Weeks, and Wes Hall and everyone. So the three Barbadians. We remember a lot from Indian context because of certain Sunny Gavaskar making the debut and doing that big chase in Port of Spain, after which Clive Lloyd and the West Indies decided that we have to change a bit about ourselves. We have to stop playing spinners. However successful Lance Gibbs is, I think he has 360 test wickets or something. They decided to move away from that formula. They became very dominant in ODI format. They won the World Cup in 75 and again in 79. But then things were happening on test front, which they felt were not giving them the domination. They lost the couple of series versus Australia, one I think 5-1, in which Lilly and Thompson absolutely destroyed them. And the famous headline that if Lilly won't get you, Thomo will. And I think they drew a lot of inspiration, and Lloyd certainly did, that they could do all the work that they could do on their thoughts, but they needed a brand and identity, and fast bowling was the way to go. And then they unleashed that against India in 76 in Jamaica, the bloody test match. And from there on, there was no turning back. They did lose a series here and there against India away and also in New Zealand, in which people say a lot of cheating happened because of the umpires and the decisions went wrong in the way. But I think that was the last nail in the coffin. You had Vivian Richards coming through. You had the big pace quartet, which we are going to talk a lot about. And then, as you mentioned, from 80 to 95, not losing a series, they went on a 27 match streak of not losing. They did the famous blackwash in England 5-0. I personally remember visiting Green Park for my first test match and walking through the small museum they have in Kanpur, and my father showing me the photo of martial law imposed in Kanpur, and that wasn't a martial law because of any political activities, but it was the great Malcolm Marshall, the revenge series. After we defeated them in the finals of '83 World Cup, they came down to our shows, won 3-0. Then they did the victory over Australia at home 3-0, and then they did the blackwash. Then they went to Australia down under 1-3-1. That was the epitome of it, and they continued that dominance till the mid 90s. So much to talk about it. There were so many factors that made that dynasty. And maybe I think we can start off from that front. Maybe it's the fast bowlers. You have something to mention about them.
Yeah, of course. When you talk about that team from West Indies, it's impossible to think about them without thinking about the pace bowling lineup that they had. Famously called the quartet, but I think they had a full lineup even behind them. If one of them got injured, they had backups. If one of them retired, then they had Courtney Walsh, Ambrose coming in. But yeah, to start off with the quartet, Roberts, Holding, Garner, Croft, and then later on Marshall coming in, Ambrose, Walsh. This is a formidable bowling lineup. And imagine them bowling to batters in the protective equipment era. Like we can say it was pre because the helmets were not fully covered. Not a lot of batters would even wear helmets. Like Sunil Gavaskar walking out there with a cap facing Andy Roberts or Malcolm Marshall. That's something like something that would strike fear in the minds of the opposition batters. And then you have famously called the perfume ball. All these bouncers from these bowlers, Joel Garner, 6'8", I think, SS, and yeah, so
And
the
he will
pace
bowl
quartet.
from 10 foot with his tall arm action.
Absolutely. And so much so that it's a stuff of movies and documentaries as well. There is a certain documentary called Fire in Babylon which talks about the pace quartet from West Indies. So yeah, for those who have not checked it out, should definitely do that. So that was point number one, which is the pace quartet.
And so
Point number
dominant they were. I remember my uncle telling me about Pat Patterson's a name, also a part of the West Indies fast bowling folklore, on how Gavaskar's bat literally fell out of his hand. He was so powerful and everything. And and they were so accurate as well. I mean, you talk about protective gear, but they were so accurate that they had such great figures in terms of average. Everyone has more than 250 wickets and an average of 20. Marshall took like more than 350 wickets. And ODI great as well, where batters had the license to go after him. So it's not just about Test cricket, which we are focusing on today, but they were so complete bowlers as well that they didn't even require having a spinner, which is unheard of. They would come down to Asia and dominate with fast bowling.
Absolutely. And since you talk about Patterson, another story SS, which is called the Sabina Park Bloodbath. So this was a time when England toured West Indies, and Graham Gooch, the great Graham Gooch, who had scored the maximum number of runs against this West Indies quartet, famously went on record and said that he was never as afraid of batting against any set of bowling lineup as he was in that particular match. And it was Patterson bowling at his rapid pace, and then the other bowlers also doing their thing. Of course, helped a bit by the spicy pitch that they had built up there, but then still, Graham Good saying that is something that holds that weightage. So that was the point that we wanted to talk about pace quartet. But then, if we move away from the pace quartet and then go to the brains of that team, we have got to talk about Clive Lloyd SS. And you had mentioned that, after that 76 defeat against Australia, where they were overrun by Lilly and Thompson, Clive Lloyd completely changed the brand of cricket that West Indies plays. And in modern times, we have seen a lot of teams do that. So we have seen England do that with baseball. We have seen again England do that in the white ball format when Ian Morgan, after their defeat in 2015, after their exit in 2015 World
Our
Cup,
coach Shastri era as well.
Coach Shastri era, and even with Rohit Sharma changing the brand of cricket that we play in white ball. So we see a lot of that happening in the modern times, but imagine that happening back in the 80s or 70s rather. That is so rare, and I think that deserves a special mention for that. So Clive Lloyd identifying that pace is the way to go, bringing in that core of players, and also not just around bowling, but also with the intentions they want to play, they want to win, and they want to win with domination. They don't just want to win, but they want to dominate the opposition. They want to strike fear in the minds of opposition batters, and that they definitely did.
And the recognition of the fact that everyone now knows that in order to win test matches, you need 20 wickets, and you want to pick those 20 wickets by pace, and you have got an army of pacers who are so accurate, so fast, and so fearsome that they're literally called the four horsemen of the apocalypse, as they are called. And recognition of an edge is something, but maintaining that edge for 15, 20 years is another thing, which they were able to do. Even after Lloyd left in 85, 86, you had Kalicharan in the middle, and then you had Viv at the back end, and Richie Richardson and Lara even at the early. They were still dominant, so that edge was still so good. It's like having a plan is so good that you don't need a plan B.
Absolutely. And then another thing which a lot of times we overlook, is just the fact that West Indies is playing cricket as West Indies. How do you bring
Yeah,
a group of people from different countries together, create a culture, and create ethos that a team can follow, bond over, and then play together as a single team? So that in
yeah. Talk
itself
about
is
talk about Mumbai lobby. You had Jamaica, Barbados, and Guyana lobby there.
absolutely. And that also takes us to the point around team culture mentality. They were absolutely ruthless, unapologetic. Winning wasn't just enough, we spoke about it, but then we also have to talk about fair play, right? Like, unlike say the Australian team from 2000s, where you would associate a lot of sledging, a lot of maybe crossing the line at times, a lot of scandalous events that the players would get caught up in, talk about monkey gate, talk about sandpaper. This West Indian team was quite clean. Even their protests were like silent protests.
Yeah.
You spoke about the tour down in New Zealand where there were a lot of biased umpiring. There's a story. Michael Holding went on a silent protest. 14 ball over that he bowled with a lot of no balls, peppered with bouncers to make a statement, but never did he cross a line. So
And
talk about
also,
that.
I think situations around the Packer series and the Apartheid rebel tour to South Africa, yes, they lost a couple of players there, but the marquee players who had a blank check like Vivian Richards to go out, they decided not to. Just moral upstanding of the racism that was happening against the blacks in South Africa, and also the pride of representing West Indies and succeeding with it. Is sometimes we have lost it in the franchise era, not just in the West Indies but across the world. But they had that. And also, if you listen to interviews of past players, yes, there is a hint of nostalgia, and nostalgia is often like uh, it's like a shadow that can blind your opinions about the past. But any pro player that you talk, they have fascinating opinions and very good opinions about West Indies and their class and their, even if they had to strike fear, they would just give a glare, no sledging at all, compared to what we think about the Australian 2000s team. So that aura and that respect is just commendable about the West Indies team that comes from everyone.
Absolutely. You talk about Viv Richards, you talk about Aura, and we have got to look at the batting, right? We have Greenidge and Haynes at the top of the order. Then comes Viv Richards and then Clive Lloyd in the middle. That's a formidable batting lineup. All the talk around the bowling quartet, pace bowling quartet, but we can't look past the batting either. They had a really formidable batting attack as well. Imagine, like, we were talking about it as the Australian bowling lineup right now, with Hazelwood, Stark, Cummins, Lyon. That has to be one of the most stable uh, bowling attacks
That's
in
one
the
of the
modern
great
times. But then,
quartets. That's one of the
yeah,
greatest quartets ever
of the modern times, and still they have lost back-to-back series against India at home,
at home.
and yeah, so imagine the kind of weightage that even the batters have to bring for it to be a very balanced attack. So we can't look past their batting either. And then,
I
of
think
course,
I think they also like lesser players. I mean, there were no lesser players, but people forget about Rohan Kanai, Alvin Kalicharan, Richie Richardson, even early models of Jimmy Adams, Carl Hooper, Brian Lara. So people forget about West Indies being dominant even till 1995. And there are some players that we still know about them. So they had such a good pace attack, backed by such good bowling, batting as well. They were like tremendously all-round team, and that's why they were there for 15 odd years.
absolutely. And just think about it. You have these legendary players retiring, someone like Viv Richards going away, and then we have Brian Lara stepping in, Carl Hooper coming in, and then Courtney Walsh, Curtly Ambrose. So they always had this pipeline of amazing talent coming in, right? There was no shortage of talent. And a lot of it also has to be attributed to the fact that these players played a lot in county cricket back in the day.
Yeah. And also, I mean, even after 95, it wasn't like a rapid fall, which we will discuss a lot. They had still had a pipeline of fast bowlers like Ian Bishop and Anderson Cummins and everyone. They still went on to win series against decent teams home and also occasionally away as well. And that was a testament because you even if you were losing your aging players and experienced players, but you still had that pipeline that will still winning you matches down the line. And West Indies is never short of talent. We all know that, even from the modern perspective as well.
Yeah, but then we also have to talk about SS. Why did the dynasty eventually fade away? Like with every dynasty, there is a rise, there is the period of greatness, but then there is also a period of falling from grace. What are your thoughts? Why?
Yeah, I think it's both some organic and also the evolution of the game. I think they were not able to replace, I feel, in terms of batting. And also how the progress of other cricketing teams were there. I think the rise of Australia, that 95 series, is quite a good testament. That famous Steve Waugh double century. Even though there was a depleted Australian team, they won 2-1 versus the West Indies away, and that changed the course a bit, the tide. And also, I feel even though they were creating good bowlers, but they were not creating good enough test bowlers to take 20 wickets consistently. I think that's the cricketing reason. And then you look at all the administrative reasons, with the financial muscle that ICC had and how the center of gravity of cricket had shifted towards India and the bigger commercial. They could invest a lot of money in their grassroots development, in their and how the craze of the game had picked up in Asia. And I think West Indies lost out uh, because of all the 96 World Cup and the revenues going and everything. And then the fractures come in. You have ultimately you lose the ethos and the integrity and the cohesiveness which West Indies cricket administration was going about. And I think that's one of the bigger reasons as well that the fractures came out. They were not, from a cricket management perspective, doing with one West Indies ethos, but their own individual island ethos. And that's also probably a big reason why big contracts were not in place. You started losing players, you started losing viewership as well. And I think all this gave a combination that teams just had a heads up on them, and you saw Australia, South Africa, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and then West Indies went from slowly. It was a gradual decline from top to middle tier, and now in a lower middle tier team.
Yeah, and quite sad to see West Indies not even qualifying for World Cups, and like they have reached a point where Afghanistan is qualifying even for the playoffs, but West Indies doesn't even get a spot
And they
in
they
the entire
they they
tournament.
still have it. I mean, and you can see they won an ICC Champions Trophy in 2004. They qualified for another final in 2006. They won a couple of T20 World Cups. They literally changed the game. Their stars are still the most wide in franchise leagues around the world. But Test has become like an expensive game for countries to host and to get that viewership and to get that, and only the big boards can do that. And there's a lot of discussion on revamping of Test cricket. I think just because of sheer talent, they will win a tournament here and there and do really well, and their players will become big stars. But I think over time, this commercial and the financial muscle aspect in West Indies administration losing the grip on how cricket should be supported and make it accessible and exciting for youngs to follow. They've lost out on that, and that's the biggest reason for the decline.
Absolutely. And I also feel that they always had superstars, right? They had Brian Lara going into the 2000s. They had Shiv Narayan Chanderpaul, Walsh
Chris Gale.
Ambrose, Chris Gale coming up. Yeah, absolutely. So they had these big superstars. But then they weren't able to build a stable team around these players who would buy into a common vision like they had back in the 80s with Clive Lloyd's vision for the team. So I think that was also another factor where they lost out on.
I mean, they
Probably.
went out and won a test match at Gaba as well, Shamar Joseph. So they can spring a surprise, but it's the consistency that matters in test cricket, and they just don't have that anymore. And that's just an outcome of all the things that happened in late 90s and 2000s.
Absolutely. And yeah, SS. So we talk about what made West Indies such a strong team. We talk about how they fell from that dynasty level. But then, we are a what ifs podcast. We
And
cannot
I have
not
got a
discuss
great
those.
what if for you. I've got a great what if for you. Because you mentioned at the very start, and I got offended by it because I'm such a big fan of West Indies fast bowling. You said protective gear era. I took offense to that. Do you think, really think, if a proper modern day protective equipment was there and you had throwdown specialists and bowling machines, would it have affected West Indies' dominance?
So I think about it in two parts. One is the actual game that is happening on ground. The other is the mind game that is happening. On ground game, I think it would not have impacted much. West Indian bowling attack was very, very potent. I think they were potent enough to be effective in any condition across the world. And we saw that, right? West Indies coming to India and defeating India with pace, going to Australia and then dominating them, going to England and dominating them. So they played across the world and dominated with that pace attack. So I think if the protective gear was there, they would still be very, very potent. But I also feel that they would have lost that X factor, that edge in their game. The fear that they struck within the opposition's minds, that probably wouldn't have been as bad. Like we wouldn't have teams coming in and talking about how to face these bowlers or how to even survive the test matches. We wouldn't have Graham Gooch coming in giving statements like, I was actually afraid of my life. So that X factor would have gone down. And I think that would have prompted the other teams to actually go that one step further in competing better. So I think by and large, bowlers were very potent, very effective. They would have continued to do so. They would have continued to dominate the batters, but probably they would have lost a test series here and there. Maybe not a
Yeah,
15-year
my
reign.
my yeah, my short response to that I think is I think they might have drawn or lost a test match here and there, but they would have won most series that they anyways won. It's just because they had cracked the formula. The tests are won by picking 20 wickets and they had the best bowlers in the world, and no team was thinking that way. They had good batters and decently couple of good bowlers, but to have bowlers who could win series by picking 20 wickets consistently, only West Indies had, with or without protective gear, with the kind of tactical acumen and how they would plan. This is also one of the things that people forget. They used to plan so well, bowling in packs and everything. They would have still been really dominant.
Okay, so now it's my chance to ask you a what if question, SS. You put me on spot and now back at you. So, what if cricket had not migrated to white ball because West Indies had actually cracked the test formula? What if cricket had not migrated to white ball? Would it have changed anything? And also with the white ball format coming in, there's also that aspect of commercialization and polarizing of the cricketing world. Would that have changed? I know you spoke a bit about it. So, from a what if point of view, what would have happened? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, white ball cricket essentially, if you have to chunk it up, it essentially came because to make the game more accessible, like 3 hour game or a 6 hour game or 9 hour game that can finish in one day, people can watch it after their work hours. Take because five-day game became much longer for a modern world essentially. And but you look at the other way, West Indies were like really dominant in the 70s, winning 2 World Cups. They were the best team, best white ball team. They reached the 83 final as well. So it's not essentially the white ball game, especially the ODI game, that would have affected them, and that did not affect them because they were so dominant. In fact, they just amplified their skills, I would say. Uh, I think it's the major reason that the commercial aspects that got brought out, and they were at the wrong end of it. They did not get, or maybe even if they got, they did not use their funds properly to invest for the future in the grassroots program, just making sure that their domestic structure is up to the mark and able to compete with England, Australia, India, who were anyways bigger economies who invested it very wisely and anyways over time got bigger chunks out of the ICC and all the broadcasting revenue. So they just about when the commercial revenues were available, they did not get the best piece of it, and whatever they got, they did not invest well. So I think it's not just that the white ball game came and or if it would have come earlier on, they would have lost even more years of domination. It's not that. It's just the commercial aspect of it, which they couldn't deal with well and couldn't, solidify their domestic structures. I think that that's the biggest problem. I think,
Yeah, and
and I don't think because of the domestic structures and how fragmented there is, it could have been different.
And I agree with that. White ball, they were doing pretty good in the white ball format as well, winning the first two World Cups and almost winning the third World Cup as well, doing a three-peat when the tournament starts. So white ball, I don't think it impacted their gameplay or their abilities, and it didn't shift anything away from their areas of strength. Commercialization, I of course feel that the point of time when cricket started to get commercialized was right after their golden era, so they missed
Yeah.
out on that bus. So I also agree on that bit.
And also, I mean, there were a couple of attempts to get like the Kerry Packer thing. I mean, if it got officiated as like an IPL window in which players could go out and earn money and then came back because of the ethos Lloyd and Richards had put in, it would have been interesting that they would have still gone out and earned money that would have prompted a lot of young players to take up cricket, but then still have the integrity and the will to play for West Indies and succeed. That would have been great for them. Now, how it would have percolated on the board, that is difficult to say, but at least in terms of garnering more attention for the youth to take up cricket, that would have been definitely helpful. If it would have been institutionalized like IPL was. Um, that could have made a difference, I think.
Absolutely. And since we're talking about IPL, there's also the factor, right? The greatest T20 what if.
If Viv
Viv
Richards played
Richards.
T20s and he would have got 35 crore for sure from
Absolutely.
Goenka and Shah Rukh Khan both for splitting 3 weeks with LSG and 3 weeks with KKR.
Yeah, but I do feel if we had T20 cricket back in the 80s, West Indies team would have dominated that and probably would have gotten the right end of cricket commercialization.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, as teams as well, as players as well, and also maybe as board as well. I mean, they would have gained a lot, and maybe cricket as a sport would have got even more viewership and more teams playing cricket. But that's the fantasy world. But it would have been great to see Viv Richards play T20s.
Absolutely. We can only imagine about it right now, what he would have done to the opposition bowlers. Okay, so one more question for you, SS. Can any team in the modern times, in the contemporary, out of all the contemporary cricket teams that we have right now, compete against that West Indian lineup? What's your pick?
Yeah, I would have picked this aging Australian team. That would have come closest. They have got like a all-time great bowling attack. In fact, a lot of teams have had their one of the best. This is the bowling era, as a lot of analysts talk about. But I think this Australian variety, you still have Boland and everyone coming in, and they have Lyon like a generational off spinner. But they also lost a lot of series in India. I mean, who will say 10, 15 years winning everywhere in the world? Uh, you think about the Koshastri team, which had good fast bowlers and great batting. I think better batting than the Australian team. Uh, it's very difficult to say. I don't think any team would come close, especially with the multi-format stuff that's going around in the world and players being available for all to us. I think this Australian team would come the closest, but I think that West Indies team is called the best team for a reason. Uh, I don't think that's going to get replicated anytime soon.
My take on that is the one team West Indies did not defeat during their unbeaten streak, which is South Africa. Of course, it's
Nice,
of
and
course
we
it's
also
a
did not defeat them in the
yeah.
Koshastri era.
Absolutely. Of course, it's a cheap shot because they weren't playing against South Africa because of
Yeah.
apartheid ban. But then still, I feel if one team I have to pick up out of the contemporary teams, then the other World Test Championship finalists, South Africa, would come close. Although they have certain weaknesses, their batting lineup is a bit fragile. I
The
don't
good
see a
bowling
world.
attack.
They have a good bowling attack. They also don't have that world class spinner like a Nathan Lyon or Ravichandran Ashwin that even India does not have
But
right now.
well, if you want to replicate West Indies formula, you don't need a spinner apparently. Uh,
Yeah.
four fast bowlers, which South Africa goes for, is very helpful. But I would love to see that formula being tried in Asian conditions, especially India. India is in transition. Maybe they will do well. So that will be interesting to see because that's also what happened in the West Indies era. England and Australia were not at their absolute best. And even though that's not throwing a shade to the Great West Indies side, now, if South Africa has to do it, India is in transition, Australia will go into transition. Maybe they can do it, but England as well. But you can always say India, England, Australia will produce great cricketers, and it will be very difficult for South Africa to win consistently away. That's what is the hallmark of that great Australian, West Indies, and Australian team. They would win away and win convincingly. Who can do that?
And for
I think no
15
one.
years, like we Indian team had a 13-year undefeated home streak,
Home
but
streak.
not home and away. That's
Yeah.
like
So there you have it, guys. A lot of discussions on the Calypso Kings. A fun trivia for you. Calypso Kings is a thing that was coined by the West Indies media, lamenting the fact that team in the 50s and 60s used to play attractive cricket but often lose. But then they became the beasts, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and from there on. So it was fun discussing this episode. Uh, we will try to continue our focus on Test cricket with the WTC final around the corner. We discussed about the other team. Maybe we will do an episode on the other team. But yeah, thank you for tuning in. We are available on all podcasting platforms. You will keep seeing us pop in on all social medias, including YouTube, with our clips and shorts. And thank you for your support and looking forward to the next episode.